Hi, everyone. My name's Nancy, and I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is April 23rd, 2013. And I like to announce that before I start my talks, just to let people know and to remind myself how far I've come as you hear the story. And right now, I also like to acknowledge that I have a sponsor. Right now, I have a co-sponsor. We work together on the steps. And just letting people know that I still work the program, even this far in, and learn something all the time about my recovery. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I came to sobriety later in my life, and I started drinking at about 16. There was no alcohol in my household. That was something my parents had decided early on, that there wouldn't be any alcohol. Neither one of my parents drank. My dad did a couple times, came home, or didn't come home, had his friend call and say once that he wasn't coming home because he was drunk. I was old enough at the time to be taking care of my brothers. I'm the oldest of three. And when he did come home the next morning, and he tells this story often, I looked at him and I said, "You better just understand when I do this." And yes, that is my personality. Those of you that know me in recovery might not know that, but I am a little bit sassy at times, a little bit mouthy, and that was something that definitely worried them. Still to this day worries them, although I think I've reined it in quite a bit since then. So that was my early days with alcohol. There wasn't any other than stories my family told about a second or third cousin twice removed that was an alcoholic. One of my dad's closest cousins died of alcoholism, but it wasn't in my face at all. And so it felt to me as though it was this forbidden thing that looked like it might be fun. So when I had the opportunity at 15 with girlfriends to actually drink wine coolers, which are the worst, but I did and tried it and drank until I passed out and woke up the next morning with puke all down the front of my favorite shirt and said to myself, "That's pretty cool. I want to do that again." And knew from that moment on that alcohol would be my best friend because I felt like I had never felt before. I felt like I could talk to anybody, that I was not afraid, I was not shy, that anything was possible, that the sky was the limit. And so that to me sounded like a pretty good solution. If that's all I had to do was drink. Now, mind you, there's no alcohol in my house, so that wasn't going to happen really readily right at the beginning. But so I continued to drink for the next 20 plus years. And it was not every day. I would drink every day for a while. Something horrible would happen. I would back off and quit for a couple months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and then I would slowly come back to it and drink again and then get myself in trouble again. And this was a repetitive cycle. I drank all the way through college, got pulled over many times, never got a DUI, never really got in trouble, got warned a few times here and there. I did use my looks a lot to get out of trouble. I will say that. I used everything I had to keep myself out of trouble. And so something bad would happen. When I was 21, I had a TIA, which if any of you in the medical field know that's a stroke without any long-term damage. And for me, that was something that said, okay, whatever I'm doing isn't working, so I need to change stuff up a little bit. So I wasn't drinking at the time, and I stopped drinking again for 3 more months. This was the gap year between my bachelor's and my master's, and I decided that's what I need to do. I need to go back to school because I had everything under control when the government gave me lots of money through grants, and I could drink when I wanted to, and I didn't have to do a lot of hard work because studying comes very easy to me. So I could do not a lot of hard work and have lots of money and be able to drink as I wanted to. So that's what I did. I applied to grad school, I applied to 3 schools, got into all 3 that I wanted to. I came here to Michigan State and came back to school for 3 more years. And so once I got back into school, I started drinking again heavily. Again, something bad would happen and I would stop drinking repeatedly. One time Once I graduated school, I was in Detroit, not knowing, wandering around Detroit, wanting to get back to Lansing because I thought I still lived in Lansing. So these are just episodes of the how far down I would go, and then I would quit for a few months or so. And the time quitting and starting again got shorter and shorter. And I tried everything that I knew. I tried seeing a counselor, I tried moderation, I tried scheduling, I tried everything possible. One counselor did tell me, she said, and this is towards the end of my drinking, she said, she did the alcohol analysis, and she said, it looks like you might have a problem. And I looked her in the face and I said, we're not dealing with that here. I was not ready. But the light was starting to go off in my head that there may be a problem here. And when that particular counselor said that, I was already midlife in my first marriage, and that was falling apart. And what I wanted help with was how could I let my husband at the time know that I wanted a divorce and didn't want to be with him anymore. And that was why I went to her. I didn't want help with my problems. I wanted to know how can I do this in a way that's humane, because I wasn't feeling like I was very humane of a person at that point. I drank for another 2 years after that. And I was here at the time that I moved. When I was married the first time, I lived in the Thumb of Michigan. And I was taking a job here, and that's how I told him I wanted a divorce. I was moving to Lansing, and he wasn't coming with me. And so I love Trisha's laugh. Everything I say, she's like, really? I can't believe you did that. So I came back to Lansing for a job, and my drinking progressed, and my OCD mind progressed as well. I was planning everything out as to when I could drink, how I could drink, how could I get myself places so I wouldn't be drinking and driving, all of that, because where I lived before, it was a country, and it was relatively easy, I felt, for me to drink and drive. Here, there's a lot more cars, there's a lot more things to run into. I mean, to run into a cow, it's not that big of a deal. Run into something here, it's a little bit bigger of a deal. So I spent more time and energy planning my drinking and drinking than I did anything else. And I had very few friends here at the time, and I felt like I had pushed myself into a corner, and I had the job of my dreams at the time. And I felt so insecure and so inadequate that I would lose that job at any moment if anyone knew how much I drank or how I drank. And so I asked one of my closest friends at the time that had helped me through the divorce, and who I'm not as close to now, but I was at the time, I said, can you tell me your honest opinion? Do you think I have a problem? And she was in the School of Social Work at the time, and she said, well, if you have to ask, I think that you might. And so I knew her answer before asking, but the fact that she was honest with me and said that, I said, okay, I think I'm going to get some help. I think it's time. And so I called a friend here that lives here, that has lived here for a very long time. I was her preschool, or I was her son's preschool teacher when I was here for my graduate degree. And I got to know her very personally as a friend. And she had told me once when we were on a conference together, she said, we were in the bar and I was ordering a drink, and I said, don't you drink? And she said, no, I drank enough in my younger years for the rest of my life. I don't drink anymore. And that simple line stuck with me 20 years later or so, and I called her and said, can we meet for coffee? And mind you, I've been in the area for a year and a half or so, and I hadn't reached out to her at all yet. And so she's wondering, why in the world would you want to reach out to me and have coffee with me? And she thought it was just a catch-up meeting. When I looked at her and I said, no, I think I have a problem with alcohol and I need help. And she said, oh, I would not have expected that from you, because I am the type of person who appears to have it all together. Even when I was drinking, I appeared that I had it all together, and I did not. Everything was falling apart. And so she took me to my first meeting, which was a women's meeting, which is no longer happening. It has since dissolved. But that group of women started me on my journey, and I came in as you do to your first meeting, full of shame, full of guilt, full of every conceivable thing that you come into your first meeting with, like, holy crap, I can't believe it's come to this, and why are people laughing? Because this isn't funny. This is life and death for me, and I feel like this is the worst thing that could have ever happened. Because if people at my work know, and all of the horrible things are going through my mind. But I get in the room and I listen, and they do the first step meeting. Everybody's sharing their stories with me about how they came to the program and how they realized they were powerless over alcohol, and that their life had become unmanageable. And there were 20 women in the room. I don't know that I ever had seen that meeting that big after that. But each of them shared and gave me their phone numbers and said, what you're going to do is you're going to go to a meeting tomorrow, and you're going to call one of us when you need to, and you're going to start doing this one day at a time. And mind you, I had been without a drink for a week and a half before I came into the program. But again, that was my pattern. I could go a little while, but it wasn't going to last long. And I was already planning, when and how can I drink again? So I decided that I'm going to give this a try. I have never felt the love and the compassion from these total strangers that I have felt in this room in my entire life, not even from my family. So that told me that these women had something that I wanted, and I wanted to figure out a way to get it in my life. And so I did what they said. I went back the next day. I went to a meeting every single day for a year because that's what I wanted. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps right away. And so that's how I came into the program. So now I'll talk a little bit about working through the steps for the first time. Mind you, I worked the steps continuously. Every time I work with a sponsee, I'm also working the steps with them and sharing bits and pieces about my experience with the step or what new experiences I'm having with that step. But the first one, I knew I was powerless over alcohol. Like I said, that very first time I drank, it was really the best and the thing in the world. And so I knew I was totally powerless, that alcohol would be in my life for a very long time. But the unmanageable part didn't come until 20 plus years later when I was here and had nothing and nobody. And my friends were telling me, you have a problem. And the fact that I was managing every single part of my life around when I could drink and how I could drink and when could I not worry about it, because one wasn't going to do it. I knew I needed much more than that, but that meant I couldn't be somewhere where I had to be responsible for myself, which meant I had to drive myself home because I didn't want to be responsible. I wanted to drink until I blacked out. And so that, to me, that was my unmanageability. And I will say, I am not one of those people that came into the rooms because I was in trouble with the court or anything like that. It could have happened many a times, but for me, not having not having anybody in my life and having this job that I absolutely loved and wondering if I was going to lose it, that was what brought me to my bottom. Now, mind you, if I were to drink today, I could go a lot lower. I don't want to do that. I want to be able to stay where I'm at because today is a lot better than it was then. So step number 2, came to believe a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. This one I had a hard time with because along with not having any alcohol in the house, it was a very religious home. We attended church multiple times a week. We changed church. Church was a big thing. Let's just put it that way. It was also used if you got into trouble. Going to church was considered your punishment. You had to go to extra church if you got in trouble because apparently you weren't learning enough at church. So that was part of it. And luckily for me, that one didn't stick. That was when Sassy Nancy came out and said, I ain't doing that. And so I did not have to do any of that. My brothers did. Could be why one of them is a preacher today. I don't know. But so that was the household I grew up in. And I knew that if this program was going to work for me, my higher power couldn't be that same God. I had to find a different God of my understanding. It had to be someone or something that was loving, caring, and I could bring all my crap to, and they would be okay with it and be able to say, don't you worry, We'll take care of this. And so that took a bit of time for me to get there. And quite honestly, I actually did the steps the first time. I said, I'll give you alcoholism. You ain't getting nothing else. I got everything else. Don't you worry about it. And it actually it's still to this day is something I struggle with. And I shared that in meetings, that I still struggle with handing my will over on larger types of things, because I still think I can do it, or I'm afraid. And I really have been working hard on that lately, because there's been a lot of things that have been out of my control, and I have to turn it over, because there's not a damn thing I can do other than control my hula hoop, which I don't know. No, my hula hoop, just me. That's it. That's all I got. So next, I made a decision to turn not my will and my life, but my alcoholism over to my higher power. And my sponsor said, "That's good enough. That's a start. We'll go with that." So that's the decision that I made. And for the third step, I rewrote my third step prayer so that it tailored what my needs were at the time. And then when I did it with my sponsor, we said the regular third step prayer, and then I prayed my prayer. That was my personal third step prayer. And throughout the years, I've changed it, so it is different, and it suits me today. But for the first time I did a third step prayer, it was the decision to turn my alcoholism. Let's see how you can handle this, because I'm a hot mess, and I think I can handle the rest of it just fine, but I clearly can't handle this. I can tell you, my higher power can handle much more than that, but that wasn't where I was at the time. Then I went to make that searching and fearless moral inventory. And I did go back to kindergarten to whoever pushed me off the slide or whatever. I don't remember now. But that list was pretty long of people I was resentful at. Fear that I had a lot of fear, actually. I was afraid of many, many things, including probably my own shadow, and which is why that Sassy Nancy often came out, because it was me trying to hide my fear. And then I sat down with my sponsor, and we didn't sit down what I try to do with my sponsees is do it all in one day and talk through the fifth step, or do the fifth step together in one day. And with my sponsor, we went over all of my fourth step together many evenings. It was a Wednesday evening, and I would go to her house every Wednesday evening to go through the fourth step 2 to 3 hours at a time. And it was probably 6 weeks or longer. So I had a ton of stuff on my fourth step that we went through and talked about, and began to see patterns that came up that showed what my character defects were and what my part was. But I had a hard time thinking I was to blame at all. I was very much in victimhood. I was very much thinking the world was out to get me, and there was none of this was my fault. It was all someone else's fault. Mind you, that does run in the family. That is how my mom is, still to this day. If anyone wonders, Scott, if you ever wonder, that's where I got that from, which we often talk about, the poor me that runs through my family. But thankfully, from doing my fifth step with a sponsor, I began to see where my part was and how I could address my character defects. And I hate using that term, but that is what is used in the steps. How I could address the things that were my part, and pray to have those changed, removed, or what I like to think about it is when you're entirely ready to have them removed and you ask to have those removed, that's when God presents you with opportunities to do different. So the first time around, I thought, all right, I'm going to say this prayer, and it's all gone. I'm a new person, and that's not the way it worked. Not for me. It gave me lots of opportunities. So if I prayed for patience, I got lots of opportunities to be patient with people. And what I was doing at the time, I do similar work now, but I was a training manager for Michigan and setting up trainings all around the state. And so I would have to be very patient with people saying that their food didn't get there on time, the trainers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, all this stuff has gone wrong, or we need to cancel because school isn't being held that particular day, and the building that we're doing it in is a school. So having patience and working through all of that stuff was something that I had to learn, because I was not a very patient person. I also was not a very kind person. that some people might find that hard to believe. I was not kind at all. I could be very rude and want things my way because that's the way they had to be. And so all of these things that came up, I had to see my part in it. I didn't accept people where they were at. I wanted them to be who I wanted them to be. And really a lot of work had to happen in that area. And so that was my step 6 and 7, recognizing what it was, praying for defects to be removed, and then doing the work to actually have them removed. Because it was not something for me that happened with a magic wand and everything disappeared. It doesn't happen to this day either. I still have to work on those defects all the time. Number 8, made a list of all people I had harmed. I again was still struggling with this victimhood, so I didn't feel like I had many people that actually did me harm. So when I made that list and went to my sponsor to do, to talk through it and everything, there were a few people that were added back on because I didn't realize or didn't think they needed to be, but she thought that they should be. And then she did take a couple of people off. And I'm not a big fan of taking people off the list, and because I think that there's a reason we thought they needed to be on the list. Although being new in sobriety, I probably should have listened to her because I did make amends to somebody she had taken off the list, and it did not go real well. So now I try to work with sponsees to talk about, okay, so you have them on your list, you feel you need an amends. Let's talk about how can you do an amend that won't harm anybody, that you're taking responsibility for your stuff, but you're not harming anyone in the process of actually doing this amend. Because, I did want to amend, took responsibility for my stuff, and I felt this person had a lot of responsibility as well. They took responsibility for none of it and never spoke to me again. I'm like, really? I really had a hard time with that, especially in early sobriety, because it just felt like it's hard enough to do an amend, but then when they choose not to accept it, it was really hurtful. I did get past it, but it is something I do like to share and work with sponsees on, that how can we find the best way to do it, and then do your part, go in and take responsibility for what your part is, ask them if they have anything they'd like to add, and leave it at that, and really talk through what the process is, because it's hard to get there, and if you're not ready, and then do someone easy first, you think it's going to be easy anyway, you think you know their answer to. So that was how, and then, I didn't go out and do all of my amends right away. There's still one person my sponsor had on my list that I have never seen to do an amend to. But if I see this person, I am prepared and ready to make that amend. And that's the gist of step 9, being ready to make amends whenever the opportunity presents itself, not seeking out people and saying, I need to sit down with you and have a conversation about the 3rd grade. Now, most people don't remember the 3rd grade. We might, but most people don't. So really being ready when the opportunity poses itself. Step 10, taking personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. For me, the step has 3 parts. It's the daily personal inventory, taking responsibility right away, and I'm decent at that. I can always improve, but I'm pretty good about that. And then doing a regular inventory every 6 months or a year, doing that kind of regular inventory, and then doing a spot check, as in any time throughout the day. And then in the evening. I'm sorry, I'm just confusing them all. In the evening, and the evening one is one I'm not great at either. But I've been doing it more often lately because I heard it helps with anxiety. Apparently, I have a little anxiety. So I have been doing the evening one more often. The spot check during the day is relatively easy. And then the yearly check, as in how have you been throughout the year, looking at where are your ebbs and flows in your character or your personality, where have you fallen off and could use a little work. And sometimes, for me, that might require doing another 4th step and doing some of the steps again, just to see how I'm doing overall, what things have cropped up. The more I'm in the program, the more I learn about myself, and the more I learn that things I thought were okay and were for the time aren't okay any longer, and now I need to do a little more work. Sometimes that's around lately, be totally honest and transparent. Lately, it has been around anxiety. And how do I live with anxiety and depression that I didn't know I had, and that probably is something that runs in the family but I wasn't aware of. And so there's always something for me that I'm learning and continuing to grow and learn through. And the reason I feel that this continues to happen is partly because of step 11 and step 12. I have a very strong meditation and prayer life. Meditation is part of my every morning meditation quiet time for 20 minutes. And then in the evening, also not for 20 minutes, but there is some quiet time. And then prayer, getting up and saying my prayers on my knees in the morning, and then thanking God for the day at the end of the day. And then saying prayers throughout the day, which is a new thing I've added. But it has helped significantly with the anxiety, to say prayers throughout the day and to let go of things I can't control. Because there's a lot of changes happening in the world and around me, and a lot of things I can't control how my brother responds to things. I can't control what my mother thinks. I can't control if I will have a job tomorrow. All of these things I can't control. So really leaning into that step 11 and letting go. And that's where also leaning into step 2 and being okay with, or working on being okay with my higher power, taking all of that stuff. Because the only thing I can control are what my actions are. And then how do I respond, and how do I accept people right where they're at, no matter what. And 12 for me is being here, sharing my story with all of you, but also chairing meetings, being at meetings, helping set up, and also I feel also being there for other people, even if they're not in the program, but letting them know where I'm at, what my life is like, and if they need help, sharing my story with them, or just being someone that shares morning readings with them. All of that stuff, to me, falls in that 12th step. And always being ready to help and being that smiling face for someone, even if I don't feel like smiling. And also being honest that, I might not feel like being very social, but I'll be honest about it and say, I'm not myself today, but I'm really glad you're here. That kind of thing. Because I feel that it's important to be there for the next person. I know it was important for me. It was important for me to have those people that didn't know me at all and come up and give me a big hug and say, welcome, we're glad you're here. And so I try to do that for people as I see them come into the program, because I am really glad they're here, because they remind me what it was like and where I don't want to go back to, that I want to be here in these rooms with all of you. And so what it's like today, I was just talking to Scott the other night that I have a hard time believing where we are today. When I came into the program, I was a month sober and bought a condo. Mind you, they say don't make any big changes in the first year. I was already in the process of buying this condo before I came into the program, so I guess it's going to happen. Anyway, and I was very miserable. Happy with where I lived, mind you. I loved the condo. But everything else was pretty miserable. And now, 11, almost 12 years later, so much has changed. I found my husband in sobriety. We have a wonderful life together, we're a team that I didn't even imagine would be possible, quite honestly. I didn't think anyone in this world would understand me as well as he does and know my needs before I even know them 90% of the time. I just didn't think it was possible. And I met him in sobriety, and we did our own work before we decided to start dating. I went through all the steps. I took that suggestion, no dating the first year. I did take that one and did all the steps and really did some work on who I was. Because remember, I said I used everything possible to get out of trouble. I used my looks a lot to get a lot of things. And I needed to recognize myself as worthy without my looks and accept myself just who I was before I started dating. For me, that was super important. And the person that I needed to be with, as I noticed in the 4th step in doing my ideal partner, was someone that respected me for who I was, not someone who was with me because of how I looked. Because that was my first husband. was with me for how I looked. And looks don't last forever, I have to say. It does not. They do not stick around. So I needed someone that accepted me for who I was and who would support me through all of my crazy ideas and striving for more and better and all that stuff, because I am an overachiever in every sense of the word. And I'm trying to work on that character defect, but it's there. And that was what I needed. And I have found that with Scott, and we have found in each other, we accept each other just where we're at all the time and can share everything with each other. And I would not have had that had I not done the program the way others taught me how to do it and continue to live it in my life every day. Now we are in our dream home and moving towards building our dream of a retreat center that will hopefully help many people that are looking to recover from their addictions, as well as helping bring mindfulness and yoga to the corporate world, which hopefully will happen at some point. Because I think we might need a little bit of that in our world. But never in my wildest dreams did I think that would happen. It was what my ex-husband and I would call a pipe dream, which meant we would talk about it when we were stoned, never thought it would happen. But it's surprising to me how the program works, that I put a thought out there in the ether, in the world, and if it's meant to happen, it happens, and I just stop worrying about it now, today. It wasn't where I was 13, 12 years ago. I was trying to micromanage every single bit of my life and very unhappy about it. So for me, that is my story to date. I'm sure things will change in 3 years when you hear it again. It'll be totally different. But that's all I have tonight. Thank you.